All right, welcome to this week's podcast. We are going to be talking about wheat and all of the things. So it's the Take Your Health Back Now podcast live. We are on March 1st, 2024, if you're rewatching this. And wheat is just a very basic umbrella term because we are going to dive into some pretty specific things. It really, really ties into so many of today's health issues, symptoms, things you might not even realize are related. And this is a topic that is really eye-opening for a lot of people, but it's really important. And it's one that we dive into in our program. And I don't think there's many other doctors, programs, anything out there that do anything besides a real high level reaction to basic wheat and where we really dive into it. So we are going to go over that with you guys today.
Yes, deep dive.
Deep dive.
If you're still confused, it's okay because
Yes.
it is confusing. And it's but like Jenny said, in our programs, if you work with us, it's all laid out. So it's not confusing. It's just laid out. You just do it, worry about it. But this is actually telling you the what's and the whys behind. But it is, and nobody's talking about this, really, no one at all. And this is really new research. And a lot of the research that we're going to talk about is actually from our own personal functional testing that we in our practice. So we started, this was a new test that started this whole thing. And I would say we started running that in 2016, maybe 17. So it hasn't been that long.
Right.
But the test that started this whole research for us, it was where it took the wheat protein, just the wheat protein, and broke it down into pieces. So if you listen to us, we talk about a protein is, like a DNA sequence. So it's XYZ PDQ, and they basically cut it, each one of those letters, and then tested your autoimmune reaction to each little piece of that wheat protein. And then what we were seeing across the board, we only work with people that are symptomatic, obviously. Hard people that were symptomatic. At least 95% of everyone tested was reacting to wheat on some level. So you may not be reacting to just gluten. You may not be reacting to just one piece of the wheat. It could be 3 pieces of the wheat, or it could be anti-gliadin at a mucosal level. I mean, it just gets really in depth. So we went back through years of these tests, and it just took all that data. And then we've worked with other scientists and doctors that were, kind of cutting edge on this. So this topic that we're talking about, that's why it's so new and nobody's talking about it.
Right. And I mean, the description of this test and the way it works is pretty basic. If you want to really learn about it, you can go online and look into how the wheat is structured, all the different proteins, all the different enzymes, there's so many pieces. So this is not just wheat, but wheat is pretty complex. Everything has, different pieces and parts to it that when you eat something, there's different reactions to different pieces of it. So it's important to remember that wheat itself has all these different pieces and parts, and things like gluten are not specific just to wheat. It is something that is in grains. So those things get people mixed up a lot. So just keep those in mind.
Okay, we can just start there. So with the gluten, and that seems to be the word that everybody understands.
Right.
There are so many people, especially people that have decided that they are going to take their own health into their own hands, because they're not getting answers. One of the first things they start to do is eliminate dairy and eliminate gluten. But gluten is a hard one because we're told that gluten is only in wheat, barley, and rye, right? Those 3. And that's not true. Those are just common places our gluten is found. And gluten, there's actually thousands of glutens, and they just haven't been researched. So thousands of different kinds of glutens. So anyway, and then, people think that if they eat gluten-free, that they're avoiding gluten. but that's not true.
No,
So
that label encompasses generally just the gluten proteins from wheat, and there is more than one gluten protein in wheat. But if you see gluten free, it is speaking to wheat gluten,
right,
not gluten.
right.
Yeah.
But there actually is plenty of gluten in all gluten-free products. I
Yeah.
should packaged foods, that type of thing. You know, if you're eating gluten-free lettuce,
I've seen stuff like that, and it just kind of blows my mind how things get labeled like.
right, or natural chicken, or
Right.
but I mean something like that that is a real food. Obviously, you can tell if it has gluten
Yeah.
or not. We're talking, anything that's packaged and says gluten free, or you go to the restaurant and it says it's a gluten free meal, or that kind of thing. So I kind of broke this down into 6 different pieces, or maybe 5 different pieces, just because it's so complex, and we could probably again talk for a week on this topic, and you would be completely confused. So much stuff. So this will make it a little more basic, even though it's an in-depth subject. So first of all, if you think about, okay, people say they're gluten intolerant, or for people that have a celiac diagnosis, they need to avoid gluten, or people that are avoiding gluten. Well, are you really gluten intolerant? Or are you wheat intolerant? Or are you glyphosate intolerant? Because now the glyphosate is on the wheat or the GMO grains, and then your body's actually reacting to that, but you think that you're reacting to gluten. I mean, it goes down this big rabbit hole, and there is no way to figure that out, like 0 ways to figure out exactly which one you are reacting to. And so that's why, again, as always, we say you just take a holistic approach, address all the things we're going to talk about, and then again, inadvertently, you will hit on which one your body is reacting to.
Right.
And then, okay, so we're going to start. Well, here, I want to say one more thing real quick. So all wheat, all grain, not only, we're not even talking about gluten at this point, we're talking about it's all acidic. Okay, so when you're adding acids into your body, you can lower your pH, make an acidic pH environment, which causes inflammation, causes all kinds of symptoms. That's another thing. But all of these things we're mentioning, they cause inflammation and they cause leaky gut, and it's that cyclical thing. So did the inflammation cause the leaky gut, or did the leaky gut cause the inflammation? And then did the leaky gut cause the autoimmune reaction you're now experiencing? And again, it doesn't even matter which order it came in, but that is what happens. It's cyclical. Wherever you came in on that circle, it's happening, and it causes more and more and more of a reaction as it continues. That's why you have to take it out.
Right. And wheat is one of those things that most people have a really high exposure level to throughout their life. And when you have issues like leaky gut, it tends to be foods that you have really high consumption of that get flagged by your body as an invader because they're seeing more of it. And wheat itself, let's see, in 2019, 765 million tons of wheat were farmed and consumed. And it's 20% of the daily protein intake of the globe, like on an average basis. So much wheat is consumed in everything. It's not just eating bread. So you have had a really high exposure to wheat throughout your lifetime, which makes it more likely to become something that your body is going to react to. And it is a really high toxin load food. So imagine all of those toxins that you've been exposing yourself to.
And also, okay, so wheat is not a GMO crop.
Right.
Okay. So, but, and we tend to think that glyphosate is sprayed on GMO crops. That's why actually it was developed way before GMO.
Yeah.
But the GMO seeds were developed to work with glyphosate.
Right.
But anyway, but wheat is not a GMO crop, but glyphosate is used on wheat to desiccate it. So they spray it. Normally they would grow their wheat and then they would let it dry out in the field. And then when it's finally dry, they would harvest it. Well, they found out that they could spray glyphosate on the wheat and it instantly kills it. So like within a day, kills it, it's dry, and then they can harvest it. And this is used all over the world too. It's not just in a country. So there is that issue, as well as how many tons did you say?
In 2019, it was 765 million tons.
That
And
is
wheat doesn't weigh much. Like,
it's crazy.
yeah.
But it's in all processed food. It's in that word that we cannot say today because we're in YouTube jail for saying that word too many times. But maybe because I said that, you can figure out what I'm talking about. But the protein is also in that. And so people, and everybody has leaky gut at this point, and so then that causes autoimmune reactions. But I got off topic. Okay, so let's just dive into the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we have here. So the first one is gluten, because that's the word everybody seems to know. So
Right.
gluten intolerant, we already talked about, there are thousands of different glutens, but the gluten protein is broken down into many different parts. So just because you're gluten, that's a really big word, intolerant, you can also be reacting to prolamins or L-glutenins or different things that we'll kind of go into later. The glyphosate, so when we're talking about glyphosate, we're talking about it being sprayed on the wheat, but of course it's also sprayed on GMO crops. So that is corn and soy, which is also in everything.
Right. Yeah. Between those three, it's really hard to avoid eating
Right.
them unless you are growing and making your own food.
Right. If you're eating processed food, you're getting them in somehow. And so glyphosate is also sprayed on, once they found out that they could desiccate the wheat and then immediately dried it out, now they spray it on all kinds of things. So sunflower crops, if you're eating sunflower seeds, flaxseed, any kind of grains, legumes, peas. I mean, there's so many different crops that they now just spray the glyphosate on just to instantly dry it out so they can harvest it.
Right.
And it's not like they're spraying it on and then they're going to wash it and scrub it, glyphosate off, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
No,
it doesn't work that way.
immediately goes through the whole process of going straight to you. So, but here's the thing with glyphosate. So Monsanto likes to say that, glyphosate is safe for people, but here's how it works. And this is an important thing to know. So glyphosate affects the shikimate pathway, which is the metabolic pathway of plants. And that's how it works with GMO seeds. But we, people and animals, birds, none of us have a shikimate pathway. So that's how they can say it doesn't affect us in a negative way. But what does have a shikimate pathway besides plants is bacteria.
Right.
And bacteria, remember, make up such a huge piece of all of us. And we work symbiotically with the bacteria. Like if you had no bacteria, you were a sick person.
Right.
Because we need our bacteria in good balance. When your body is functioning and in balance, we have 10,000 times more bacteria in our body than cells in our body. Think about that.
Right.
And
people
so
don't like to think about that. They like bacteria to be bad, but there's definitely good. Like, I don't understand why people are so into probiotics, but then you tell them they're full of bacteria and they get upset.
we are bacteria.
Yeah.
If they took away our cells, there's lots of scientists that say you would still be recognizable. So like for me, if all of my cells were taken away, Kendra, would still be recognizable just from the bacteria in my body, which is crazy. I mean, visually, you'd be able to tell who I was. So, think about that. So this glyphosate that's now infiltrated everything, it's been around since 1974. They use it on all these different crops, not to mention all the parks use it. All the, so many people use it on their lands, their grass and their landscape. It's used everywhere. It's not even just the farms, it's just everywhere. It's in our water supply. And So now it's disrupting this friendly bacteria in our body,
Right.
which helps to grow infections and the bacteria to get out of balance and kills it off. And then the bad guys, we call them, proliferate. And it's just causing all of these problems. But the other thing that happens with glyphosate to keep in mind is, okay, so say they sprayed it on, we're using wheat as an example. So they sprayed it on the wheat field. You've been eating conventional wheat, bread, pasta, packaged food, all the things. And then you learn this and you're like, oh no, I'm going to now eat organic everything and I should be fine. Or ancient grains. I hear a lot of people say, well, I ate ancient grains, sourced from other countries. Well, it doesn't matter because your body, once it tags something as foreign, the protein, and again, the sequence is very long.
Right.
And your body only has to recognize 80% of a sequence to go, that's what I'm looking for. That's bad. So we're going to start, attacking that, get rid of it. It starts attacking your body tissue as well. So even if you start eating ancient grains and organic ancient grains where you know that they're not sprayed with glyphosate, your body has already tagged that wheat sequence, that protein, as foreign. We need to get rid of it because of that glyphosate that's attached to it. So even if it doesn't have the glyphosate attached to it anymore, it doesn't matter. It's still reading that sequence and going, no, this is bad.
Yeah. This is close enough. I don't like you. You look like that bad guy. I'm going to attack you.
Right.
And side note, that is a large area of research because it's like 10% of the population now is having some sort of wheat reaction, like celiac, non-wheat allergy, non-celiac, wheat sensitivity. Like these are the main things that are looked at. And they're now researching the protein structure of wheats and grains to try to find versions that are less allergenic, which leads into synbio, which is going to happen. So even though GMO or wheat is not a GMO crop right now, it is really likely that fairly soon it's going to come into that synbio arena, and they're going to be like non-allergenic wheat and stuff like that. So keep that in mind.
Right. But it already has. That's a good thing to bring up because transglutamase
Oh,
is
yeah.
glue, meat glue, not wheat glue. And I'm sure we've talked about that before. So that it's an enzyme that they use to glue together, because remember, gluten is glue. That's what
Right.
makes bread spongy and ties it together. But this meat glue is an enzyme that can take several different pieces of meat and glue it together. You could have a piece of meat from China and a piece of meat from here, and they use this enzyme and glue it together, and now you
It
have
doesn't even matter if they're both from here. They're both
yeah.
organic. Like you don't want glued together meat.
No, and that transglutamase is a synbio product. That's one
Yes.
of the first synbio things they ever made, actually.
Right.
And it's in everything. It's not labeled. It's in sausages. It's in brats. It's in hot dogs. It's in chicken nuggets. It's in steaks that are
Right. Like you see that beautiful high-end New York strip, just imagine, because that's a pretty easy thing. And that could have that transglutamase in it to keep it in that structure and that, visually appealing state.
right. And another place that synbio transglutamase um, is in plastics. So we
Yes.
talked about that, I think, in the synbio podcast we did, but all of these bioplastics now, and one place to find that people are reacting and they don't know. So you get say a child with celiac having a terrible reaction, and the parents are trying to completely avoid all gluten, but the child has a retainer in their mouth. So dental retainers, braces, a lot of different dental apparatuses, for lack of a better word, that bioplastics, and it's has
And even if they haven't moved into the bioplastics, if it's just the traditional soft plastics, they were still using the transglutamase in it.
yeah. And so there's a PubMed article actually on a 9-year-old girl that kept having this reaction and they couldn't figure out why she kept having a reaction. They realized it was the retainer, and they took the retainer away, and
Yeah.
she finally was able to heal. But your body, again, it only has to see a small sequence, and if it's already on high alert, because remember, your body's job is to keep you alive, right? That's it. So if it sees that in this plastic, even in nobody seems to send anything anymore, but in envelopes, if you look
Yeah.
in that glue that has it, I mean, it's in all kinds of different places. I don't think they have lick stamps anymore. They're just sticky stamps, but it was in that. So there's many different places where it's hidden that you would never imagine. So just kind of keep that in mind. And one other thing on that topic, all these people that thyroid issues, Hashimoto's, different thyroid issues, has become, I would call it an epidemic. I mean, it's like everyone seems to have a thyroid issue, and then they get
Yeah.
on synthetic thyroid hormones because their body is not, producing, or whatever it is. There's a lot of different thyroid issues. But here's the other thing that happens. So not only is gluten and wheat and glyphosate, all these things, not only do they cause leaky gut, not only do they, cause inflammation in the body, but they also look like similar, that protein sequence talking about looks similar to protein in your own body. So, which one of them happens to be thyroid. So everyone that has any kind of thyroid issue, it's directly linked to gluten and what we're talking about. And that's just one issue that people are having, but that's just something to keep in mind. It's not just celiac.
Right.
There's many different, and that's out there. We're not just saying this.
Right. And that's what autoimmune means. Your body is now attacking itself. It's not just attacking that wheat protein, it's attacking your own cells that aren't made of wheat, but are close enough in structure that it's doing that. It's not a surgeon, it doesn't have a little scalpel, it's got this giant hammer and it's just attacking anything that's close, that's related, and that is your thyroid. So your body is attacking itself because of the protein structure that it attacked of this foreign invader that was wheat.
Because it looks similar. And then to lead into something else that means similar, because again, you think your body is on high alert. It's like constantly, it's like, that whole analogy I have with the dodgeball. It's bombarded from all angles, and it's constantly, it's like looking, and just freaking out. So it's not going to take the time to look at the entire sequence and make sure it's exactly the same thing.
Right.
Okay, this looks close enough. We're doing this. But another source for people that are reacting to any part of the wheat protein or the gluten protein is they're reacting to, or cross reactivity, I should say. So there are a lot of different foods that are not grains at all, do not contain gluten at all. But again, their protein sequence is so
Right.
similar that now your body's reacting to all those foods as well. And those can be things like chocolate and dairy. What else? There's a whole list.
Egg, oats, potato. I just pulled up the document. So in our program, this is really involved in we don't expect people who are sick and trying to get healthy to become experts in everything. So we do provide a lot of these resources like gluten cross reactivity. We have a whole document that lists these and kind of breaks it down. Hidden sources like we were talking about, soft plastics, cosmetics, things like that. We really want people to have a good handle on this because this is a huge topic and it's so hard. Like if you're not part of our program or a member and you're just listening to this, then you probably need to take notes because it's so detailed and so specific. And it's just one of those things that you have to know the things in order to avoid the things.
That's why we always say a system
Yeah.
is important, because with anything, a system is like a roadmap or a blueprint or a recipe, and it's all laid out for you. If you're trying to research this on your own, first of all, it's impossible. Second of all, if you were really like, if you had the time to dedicate this and you were interested in it like we are, you just go and go and go down these rabbit holes, and it's more and more and more. You would get, and if you don't feel good,
Right.
it's just overwhelming. It's beyond overwhelming. So when you have a system and somebody else that really is the expert, you don't even have to think about it. You just
Right.
do the things as they're laid out, and you don't have to do the research. You don't have to learn all of this. It's just it's done for you so that it is eliminated. But we do like to tell people why we
Yes.
but anyway, that's some different topic. But yes, the hidden places is a huge one, because I mean, the list, you should see the list we have in the program. It is several pages,
Yeah.
several columns on each page. It
Yep.
is in so many different places. And then on top of that, it is under so many different words, labels,
Yes.
common ingredients that you see in all kinds of products that you would have no idea had gluten or were related to the wheat protein, or at all.
Yeah.
That you're used to the word because you see it in many different products. Also, uh, what was I going to say? I thought of one other thing where it's hidden. I forget. I'll think of it. I always
See, we had medications, supplements,
right.
cosmetics. Yeah. I don't.
Cosmetics, you have wheat germ, vitamin E, all of those are the wheat germ. This is a funny story. When I was, if anybody knows my story, I was sick forever. That just got worse and worse and worse till in my 30s. But when I was a kid and having all of these issues going on, and my mom was really pretty crunchy, and she tried to kind of a hippie and did all kinds of, we went to the health food store and all that kind of stuff. But she made us eat wheat germ every day. Like that was what we ate for cereal.
Right.
So gross, by the way. But anyway, but then later I found out that that was one of my autoimmune reactions was to wheat germ. And
Right.
I thought she was doing the right thing because it's healthy, and she also gave us multiple vitamin E tablets because we had skin issues. Which seems like a good idea, but where does that come from? Now it's SynBio, but where did it come from? It was from wheat germ.
Right.
So it's just once your body is reacting, it's just almost impossible to figure it out, even if you think you're doing the very best thing. Oh, I know what I was going to say was gluten free. We talked about that a little bit ago, but gluten free has everything that's gluten free has so much gluten in it because of these other areas, other grains. And
Yes.
pea protein is a big one you see in protein powders and in gluten free and that type of thing, but it also has gluten in it. So it's just, anything that says gluten free, avoid it.
Right. And especially if you're trying to remove something from, we're just talking about food here, from your diet, you really need to get in the headspace where you're removing it from your diet and you're not out there looking for, a very similar replacement that just doesn't have that one piece in it. So that's the problem with things like gluten-free, sugar-free, fat-free. You are then looking for a product that is going to be almost the same, but it's not going to have that one thing. And if you think about that, how is that accomplished? It's not accomplished through any natural means. There has to be so much processing to take one thing and turn it into another. So, with gluten-free, it's almost always breads, grains, something that is, what you would think of with basic wheat. And they're going to take other grains, like we were saying, that aren't considered wheat or wheat gluten. They're going to put those in there, but then they're going to add so much other stuff and process it so much to try and get that same outcome that it's just overall bad for you. Like, even if they could do it without any gluten being in there, it's still terrible for you.
But and that's a good point, because it's kind of like when we've talked about before where they had plastic water bottles. Well, then there was a lot of information on that the BPA was really toxic for us, really bad, caused all kinds of health problems.
Right.
So they decided they would take it out but they still have plastic water bottles, and that BPA served a purpose. So now they have to find something else to put in to take its place. So, which, we've talked about, then we found out that was equally as bad. So
Right. The bottles were exactly the same. They just had a label on them, but they seemed exactly the same. So it's hard to imagine that the product that they used was that significantly different when the outcome was exactly the same.
Right. So it's very similar to gluten-free. So they took a bottle, they took out the BPA that was bad, they put in something new, and then now they can call it BPA free, and people still buy BPA free because it makes them feel
Right.
like, hey, but it's not. It's equally as bad, does the same thing.
We just haven't had it around long enough to bring, big lawsuits and get it removed.
Exactly. And the same with gluten. So many people are clearly reacting to gluten now. So now they make gluten free. But if you think about, like what Jenny was saying, they're still trying to keep the cakes and the breads and the pastas. Right. So gluten serves a purpose. Like we said, it's a glue. That's what it does. If you've ever tried to make homemade cakes, breads, pastas without wheat, it's hard because it doesn't taste, and it doesn't have that nice texture and stick together the way, using wheat does. So it's the same thing. So they're trying to put something in to still make it stick together, make it be bread or, but anyway, it is still equally as bad. And then this just kind of explains why. So this gets pretty in depth, but this is why all grains are bad, even if we're not talking about the glyphosate issue. So prolamines are in all grains. Prolamines are common lectins. So lectins, and all plants have lectins of various quantities, but the purpose of a lectin is so that it, like an animal would bite you if it was trying to save itself, right? It would have a way to attack or whatever it was doing to protect itself. Plants don't really have that, so they have these lectins. So the idea with the lectins, it's a poison, basically a toxin for people and for animals. So that, say, there's a field of spinach, the deer don't come along and eat the whole field and kill them all. So it's a protection mechanism. And seeds have this, fruit has this, so that when a plant is ripe or when the fruit is ripe, the lectin level drops because the plant is protecting itself. It doesn't want you to pick the apple until the apple is ripe. So it has that high toxin level to preserve it, kind of make whoever's picking it sick.
Right. And this is not like an acute sickness. Lectin is not something that is generally like you ate that one not quite right apple and all of a sudden you were super sick. It's like a quantity thing. So that's why the levels change throughout the life cycle of the plant and its fruit. So it has a lot to just instinctually get animals, including humans, to not eat that massive quantity well it's at that stage, because then you get like digestive upset and you just don't feel good. And it's not like acute poisoning. It's kind of a and then as it ripens, that comes down, and then we instinctually know, hey, when I eat it when it's like this, it's so much better. I feel great. Plants are really smart, and before humans had all the scientific processing, we knew this. We knew when to eat certain fruits, when to eat certain plants. We knew not to eat this kind or at this stage. Like, we didn't have testing for that. We knew, and we knew because of our basic biological reactions between, the plant at where it's at and our biochemistry. So it makes sense.
Yeah, when you look at it from that point, like we ate in season because something was ripe, and then you just get it in that short time frame, and then you can do canning or whatever people used to do with those ripe fruits. But anyway, the point is, prolamins have several different kinds of that lectin, which is that toxin for us in animals. But then that is broken down. So, I mean, this gets pretty in depth, but this is why it's a good explanation. So the lectin is broken down into 3 proteins, and the proteins are glutenin, glutenin, and gliadin. And gluten is a protein, and it is also broken down into those glutenin, 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 gliadin. But it comes down to that same, if your body's reacting to one, it only has to see part of another one to then be reacting to it. And the point is that these prolamins and L-glutenins and gluten are in all grains, all grasses, pseudo grains, and legumes. And so that's why if people are having a severe reaction to, gluten, then you can also be having a reaction to something that has no gluten, it's cross-reacted, but also to something that's like a legume, because it actually does have gluten when you really get in depth and look at it across the board. And again, it only has to be a small amount, or a partial piece of your body to react once it's already reacting at an autoimmune level, if that makes sense.
Right. And those are all like, very, it's all really scientific. And all of those words are so close because clearly scientists aren't super creative on naming. They just, these things are so close. They have a name that is very, very close. But the overall thought, theory, idea here that we implement in our programs and we're talking about today, and why you have to be careful with wheat and gluten, is that anything that is a grain, anything that is a pseudo grain, which are grasses and people think grasses. I don't eat grass, but like wild rice you were just talking about before the podcast. Yeah, legumes. So like peas, like we were mentioning, and things like that, like beans, and you don't clump them in with like grains. So it's important to know what all of these kind of high level categories include so that you can stay away from them.
Right. And here's another thing. If you go back to the glyphosate, and maybe I already mentioned it, but we're talking about L-glutamins, which are in legumes, lentils, peas, things like that, cashews. But also all of those crops are sprayed with glyphosate. And again, to desiccate them. So
Imagine.
it or is it the gluten? Again, it doesn't even really matter, but that is why everybody's reacting. And here's another thing that we have found, and again, when you work with us, our program, everything, or our system, I should say, we have 2 different programs, both use the same system, but it is based on test results. Everything is based on research. There's nothing made up. So, I don't know. It's just, it goes so in depth. And it just makes it so much easier, but it is, I just want you to know that this is all research based across the board.
And there are, like, if you're listening to this and this is really interesting to you, there are people that, like us, want to know, like, they want to know this weird science stuff. And why, if someone just told me 8 years ago, like, gluten is in everything, not just wheat, I'd be like, really? Tell me more. How can I find that out? So that's why we do these topics like this, where we really deep dive into it, so that, we've taken all of this research, all these test results, all of this, everything that we're doing that we enjoy doing, and kind of giving you a little bit more information on it so you can be a little more educated on these topics, even more so than we go into in our programs and systems. Like, we try to keep that fairly simple. We give you the high level overview, the things to avoid, but like what we're doing today, and we do on other podcast topics as well, we're diving in so that you can really understand how these things work and the why behind it.
And a big reason for that too. I don't even think that was so important before, several years ago, but it is so important now that people know, because it's so hard. Like when you tell people that they have to avoid wheat across the board, that is hard because think how many things you eat that have that in it. It's, and so for me personally, and I know Jenny's this way too, and I think most people we work with, if you know why,
Yeah.
it makes it a lot more, it just makes it easier for you to say, okay, I'm in, I'm going to do this. Whereas if you don't know the why, your perspective changes. So if you know the why, it's okay. You feel empowered. If you don't know the why, then it's like, this is the worst thing ever. Why am I sick? This is awful. It
Yeah.
just, it seems more empowering, even if you don't understand all of this, or you don't necessarily find it as interesting as we do. Have some of that knowledge behind you. So you're like, okay, I get it. And again, it all comes down to just what is being done to our food, what is being done to everything in the environment around us. And it's just a way for you to be empowered and
Yeah.
live in our unhealthy world.
Right.
I was going to say, and I completely got sidetracked, was one other thing with our testing and our research base is that we have found that vegans have a really hard time. Vegans, if they have gotten to the point where they have autoimmune reactions and they have leaky gut and they're symptomatic, they have a really hard time continuing on a vegan diet to heal. So we've had many people that went ahead and they embraced what we do, and they said they will do, whatever we tell them to do to get better. And then they were able to go back to a vegan diet, but a healthy vegan diet, and
Right.
not a vegan diet that is full of all kinds of processed, vegan.
It's a commitment. And that's what a lot of people, vegan, vegetarian, anything that's that kind of restrictive eating. If you're doing it for health reasons, if you're doing it for, morality reasons, um, you have to really commit to putting in time and energy to creating a healthy diet. And most people don't do that. They just jump in, from that morality standpoint, or they think it's a healthy standpoint to avoid meat, and they don't really research it. And they end up just eating the most processed, packaged food because to get enough protein, calories that from just vegetables and fruits, it takes a lot. You have to eat a lot, like, and it gets boring. So you have to put a lot of work in, and most people don't. But the thing is most people don't know that. So they think they're doing something good, and they end up in this really unhealthy, for different reasons, lifestyle.
Some of the sickest people that we worked with were vegans.
Yeah.
And part of that reasoning is because there are so many things around us in our environment, and this can even be stress. If you have a high stress lifestyle, alcohol, glyphosate, the foods that we're eating, just all kinds of different things cause leaky gut. And if you have leaky gut, then you have these autoimmune reactions. And like we said, at least 95% of all people that are symptomatic are reacting to gluten and wheat. So if you are a vegan and now you have leaky gut, all vegan food, I mean, even if you're eating a really healthy vegan diet, you're getting, like Jenny said, you're getting your protein from legumes and, grains, legumes and grains make a complete protein, and lentils, things like that. But every single one of those is contributing to this autoimmune reaction to gluten. Right. You have to be willing to step back from that and do something else in order to break that cycle, heal the gut. And then once you've healed the gut, as long as your body hasn't been reacting too long to these,
Right.
then you go back to a healthy vegan diet. But we've had people that just could not step away from it, and they got a little bit better, but you like literally can't sustain yourself on a true vegan diet, even if it's a healthy one. We've had some people that came from India, grew up in India, and they were vegans, or vegetarians, and they lived that lifestyle there, but they were getting good, healthy food. And, they lived away from, they were just living a lifestyle, authentic lifestyle where they didn't have leaky gut and that type of thing. Then they came to America for whatever reason. A lot of times it was for work or, whatever. But they came here and started eating an American diet and started, living an American lifestyle and that type of thing. And then that's when they got really sick.
Right.
And that vegan or vegetarian lifestyle they were eating now is contributing to their problems, whereas before it wasn't, if that makes sense. That's something else to think about with this whole topic. So I think that's all we had, right? It's a huge topic.
And we didn't talk quite as long as we usually do, but I think it's because this is like, it takes a lot of processing. I almost feel like if this is the first time you're hearing about any of this, you might need to like listen to this a couple times
right.
just to pick everything up. So hopefully we gave you enough information that you can make sense of all this, but not too much that you're overwhelmed and you shut it all off.
And if you are overwhelmed, of course, reach out, because we make things easy so it's not overwhelming as much as we can. But this is something that at this point is affecting everyone across the board. And like we said, if you are symptomatic, if you know someone that's symptomatic, children especially, anyone that's been diagnosed with autoimmune, thyroid issue, celiac, any kind of GI issues, anything, more than likely you are having a gluten or wheat issue. And this information that we just told you, it's very important for them. So make sure you share this one with anyone you can think of, because really it affects everyone.
Right. And there's a lot of people that'll say, like, oh, well, I cut out bread and pasta and I didn't see any change. So then this would maybe be why, because there's so much more to it than just that simple wheat. And then there's people that'll say, like, well, I had a celiac test and I didn't come up celiac, but that's just one way to react to wheat and gluten. So that doesn't rule out all of this. So this is one of those things that maybe people or yourself have tried a little bit, but if you didn't have all of this other information, you may not have known. So you might want to go back now with this information and try again. And of course, if you're working with us, we give you all of the information and what you should and shouldn't be eating.
Thing that I just that we didn't touch on. We mentioned medications and supplements, things like that, but also alcohol. Think how many people that drink beer, and there's so many different kinds of beer, and there's all of this craft beer and the school beer now, and then other grain alcohols, and there's alcohol is a big one for this. And then if you think about also alcohol is inflammatory, alcohol causes leaky gut. Also wines, grapes are sprayed, unless they're organic and regeneratively grown and biodynamic and all those good things. They're sprayed with glyphosate too. So that glyphosate issue. So it's just infiltrated everything.
Yeah.
So anyway, but hopefully this helped and you found it interesting, as we do. But we've really seen huge changes in people since we started implementing this piece as well. And also another thing, just remember, if you're trying to do this on your own, if you're pulling out gluten, or even if you listen to this and now you try to incorporate everything that we said, gluten, even if you go in depth like we did, that is still just one piece of the puzzle of what's causing you or someone else, or if you're a practitioner, your clients, to be symptomatic.
Right.
Then you have to take that broad-based look at it and this holistic approach and address everything. So this seemed like a lot, but really it's just one little piece of the puzzle.
It is.
Don't get hung up on, okay, well, if I eliminate all gluten in all of these areas, it's going to fix everything, because it won't. It will help, but it's definitely one piece, but there's so much more to it. So just don't forget that as well. Okay. So that is it for now. We won't be putting the video up on Monday like we normally do, since we're in YouTube jail. It'll be maybe a couple days later. Is that right?
Yeah, so if you're watching this live in the Facebook group right now, then and you want to share it, then you'll have to wait, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday, we'll have it up for, public consumption. If you are watching this on our YouTube or through our podcast, then we've already posted it. And thank you, and like and subscribe and share.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.